After spending nearly a month fully funded, the Weaponsmith project is finally finished construction in the hub, and with it have come a whole host of changes. This update brings a ton of new starter gear for the early game, and adds a bunch of items to make the archer class far more dynamic. Today, I'll be breaking down the entirety of the Weaponsmith project. My name's DK, and welcome to the Skyblock Scoop. Before we get too far into it, I want to quickly mention that in a few days, I'll be giving away a Hyperion entirely for free in my Discord server, so if you want to enter, make sure you're subscribed and join by clicking the link in the description. To start, I want to explain what this update actually is. A few weeks ago, the Community Center project to upgrade the Weaponsmith completed, and since then it's been under construction. With this update, the construction completed and added a bunch of new items around the Weaponsmith in the hub. To start off, let's look at the changes to the Weaponsmith. The Weaponsmith NPC now has one new item known as the Artisanal Shortbow. This is a shortbow, meaning that it has the same ability that the Juju shortbow and the Terminator have, meaning it shoots arrows instantly. It doesn't deal a ton of damage, but it is a rare bow for only 600 coins, meaning that's not a bad deal for an early game weapon. This bow doesn't have much use outside the hyper early game, but if you don't have a Juju or a Terminator, it will be necessary if you want to complete the quest in the basement. Next up we have Rosetta, who sells very early game gear. This gear is intended only for the hyper early game, and there are 6 new sets that have been added. The first 2 sets are just regular iron and diamond armor, and both come enchanted with growth 1 on all pieces. The iron armor is very cheap, only costing a total of 100 coins for the full set, but the diamond armor is a little bit more expensive and requires combat skill 3. The full set of Rosetta's armor gives 10 more defense than a full set of diamond armor, and comes enchanted with growth 1, but in total it costs 5,000 coins. The next 2 armor sets both require combat 5 to use, and those are the Celeste and the Squire set. The full set of Squire armor costs 24,000 coins and gives some okay stats. It's uncommon, so it's not really going to have any good damage reforges, and it comes with a sword that's pretty bad as well. In total, buying all of these would cost 29,000 coins, and it's a decent stepping stone from the hyper early game to the early game. While this set doesn't do anything crazy, it also comes with the Celeste wand, which costs 5,000 coins, and is an early game mage weapon. This weapon is a skill shot that you have to aim at the ground. When you right click with it, it summons lightning at the location that you were looking at. It only does a few hundred to 1,000 damage, so it's not really going to be a massive DPS boost. However, it is a decent early game mage weapon just to introduce the mage class. The last 2 sets that Rosetta sells both require combat 9 to use, and those are the Starlight and the Mercenary armor. Merc armor is a rare armor set that costs a total of 180,000 coins. Its stats are slightly better than clean Ender armor, but it doesn't have the Ender armor ability. It also comes with an axe that's a midway jump between something like an undead sword and a raider axe. It isn't great and has no special abilities, but it can be enchanted to be okay. All in all, while this armor set is decent, I'm pretty much always recommend using something like Ender armor because of the fact that it's epic and thus gives better reforge stats. You'll be dealing a decent bit more damage in Ender armor, and especially when you go in the end, because then all of your stats will be doubled. The other armor set is once again a mage armor set and is called Starlight armor. It also costs 180,000 coins and is rare, and gives okay defense stats, but its real buff is that it gives a total of 200 intelligence. For an armor set that only costs 180,000 coins, this really isn't that bad, and it comes with a weapon called the Starlight Wand. The Starlight Wand is once again a mage weapon that requires you to look at the ground when you aim it, and when you do, it creates an area of effect that deals damage over time to all those within it. Using the Starlight armor increases the time that it stays around by 2 times, and makes the area of effect a little bit larger. Similar to the Celeste armor, I really don't think that this is going to be crazy for any meta out there, but it is a decent introduction to the mage class in the early game. One thing that I really like about this update is that the Rosetta NPC has starter gear in big letters over her head, and each of the armor sets has a basic description of what they're for and what they do. Now that we're done talking about starter gear, let's take a look at the other half of this update, which is an update to the archer class and adds a bunch of new arrows. When you first talk to Jax, you'll be greeted by a dialogue line that asks you to complete a quest in the next room. You have to stand on the pressure plate and shoot all of the targets within 25 seconds. To complete the quest, you stand on the pressure plate in the center of the room and shoot arrows at the lanterns to turn them on, and you have to turn all of them on within the time frame that Jax allotted for you. To fully complete this quest, you have to do the same thing 3 different times, first in 25 seconds, then in 15, and then in 12. Doing so unlocks the entirety of Jax's shop, and with it unlocks 10 new arrow types, and we're going to go over those now. The first 4 arrow types are the simplest, and those are the iron, gold, redstone, and emerald tipped arrows. These just increase the damage that your bow deals, and they cost iron, gold, redstone, and emerald respectively. They're pretty cheap, and you can fill your entire bag for only a few thousand coins, and doing so will increase your damage by a decent bit. The next 6 types of arrows are much more interesting, and those are the enchanted arrows. Each of these also increases your damage, but they have an ability alongside of them. The first arrow type is the bouncy arrow. The bouncy arrow costs 24 slime blocks and gives your arrows a 50% chance to bounce to another target after they hit. Each time the bouncy arrow bounces, it decreases its damage by 15% and it can only bounce up to 4 times. The next type of arrow is the icy arrow and costs 1 stack of packed ice per 1 stack of arrows. They also have the highest damage value of any of the arrows, and on hit, slow the target for 3 seconds. The next arrow is the Armor Shred arrow, which has low damage and costs enchanted sand, but it ignores part of your target's defense. While this won't ever really do anything in the overworld, it will be great for some dungeons mobs that have high defense. In my opinion though, this isn't really that powerful, just because 5% of your target's defense isn't a ton. The next arrow is the Explosive arrow and costs blocks of coal, and basically turns all bows into an explosive bow. However, it doesn't work exactly like the explosive bow because it deals less damage depending on the number of targets that are in the radius. If there's only one, then it'll deal the full damage to that one target, but if there are more than one, it divides the damage to each by the number of targets. And yes, that does mean you can get situations where one hit crits and one doesn't, but both deal half of what they normally do. Next up is the glue arrow, which costs tarantula web. It increases your damage by 15, and whenever you hit a target, it stuns them from walking for 1.5 seconds on a 6-second cooldown. This is arguably the most powerful arrow type because it can completely lock down targets every once in a while, meaning that you'll get a much better time, especially when dealing with dungeon mini-bosses. The final arrow is the Nanzorb arrow, which costs enchanted cactus green and chains the piercing enchant to the skewer enchant. Skewer acts very similar to piercing, but instead of decreasing damage per hit, it increases damage per hit. The last item in Jax's shop is one that I've had in my inventory the entire time, which is the Arrow Swapper. The Arrow Swapper lets you swap between the arrow types in your quiver by left-clicking and right-clicking. It tells your arrows what type to prioritize, and you can cycle through all of them. This is really useful when you start getting more arrow types within your quiver, because it would be really annoying to move them around, and you can't even do that, so then you can't sell them to people who haven't completed the quest. One final note about the arrows is that while you can buy 1 stack at a time by left-clicking, you can also right-click to fill your entire inventory. Another note is that all of the arrows actually have combat and collection requirements, and while they aren't really that difficult for most players, they will take a little bit of time to unlock if you're in the early game. This update did also patch a few assorted bugs, such as hoe stacking, but with that, I'm pretty sure that just about wraps it up for this video. If you enjoyed today's episode of the Skyblock Scoop, subscribing would really help me out. I also recommend you join my Discord server where I'll be giving away a Hyperion entirely for free. All you need to do is join. With that said, I'll see you guys later, and adios.